Hello Horror Hounds, we're going to go old school today with 1979's The Amityville Horror, and as anyone over a certain age will tell you, there's no school like the old school, and for anyone under that age it's just a load of old farts talking about some useless shit that doesn't mean anything. And that's where the problem lies in me trying to honestly review The Amityville Horror for you. I'm going to have to put my bias on the table right at the top of the video. I cannot objectively review this film for you. If I was going to do that, then I would tell you that it's a bad film, but I can't do that. Way back during my fledgling years of really getting into horror, when I was far too young to watch horror movies, it was books. You could get your horror from books. I've talked about this previously in a Horror Memories video of James Herbert, and also the Horror Memories video of the Hamlin Book of Horror. But one of my earliest horror book reading moments, you know, the gateway into this subject matter that you couldn't rent or buy because you were too young and your parents wouldn't let you see it, was Jay Anson's book, The Amityville Horror, and it gripped me. And then finding out that there were sequels, and then this guy called Hans Holzer, who was a parapsychologist, went and did a book about the murders that took place in the house before the Lutz family moved in, and that it was all true. And then when you get to finally see the movie as a kid like that, with all that mythology in your head, especially the fact that the book had a fucking map of a house so you could trace around and follow where it was all going and what was happening, and the relentless nature of the book, with George at 3:15 every morning waking up and the rest of the family asleep, laying face down, as the DeFeo family were when they were murdered, and Jody the pig, and all of this kind of stuff. Just, it was already there. I was already steeped in all of it by the time I came to this film. So by the time I returned to this film to talk to you about it, it's still there, like a tea bag that's been steeped in this boiling water of mythology for so long. I can't objectively talk about this movie. I'm going to try, but I really like the Amityville Horror. The big question to ask yourself is whether you like, in your haunted house movies, in your paranormal investigation movies and stuff like that, do you like to see your demons and your ghosts, or do you just like them alluded to? And the answer to that question is going to go a long way towards telling you how you're going to get on with the Amityville Horror, because whilst there is absolutely no doubt that this film informed more recent movies like The Conjuring. For God's sake, the first 15 minutes of this movie, it was so weird. I hadn't really watched the films close together, but it was like, this is The Conjuring. I mean, this got pre-Conjuring. This got remade in 2005, and I'm probably going to have a look at that video as well, that remake. And the pendulum had already swung. The remake of the Amityville Horror is ram-packed full of ghosts and ghoulies and things jumping out, and jump scares and musical cues to make you jump out of your seat. So it's, I guess it's an interesting way to look at the changing times and the changing approach to horror. You can take essentially the same story and you'll see two completely different approaches. And unless my rewatch of the Ryan Reynolds Melissa George remake is radically different to how I remember having seen it, do you know what? This is the approach that works for me. Let's get the elephant out of the room. Let's get the elephant in the room out of the room. All of this stuff is supposedly based on a true story, and whilst as a kid that stuff intrigued me and scared me and hooked me in, I don't buy it for one fucking second as an adult. I think that the Lutzes, George and Kathy, especially George, but you know, I think the con artists, I think that Ed and Lorraine Warren, the psychical investigators who are now the beatified subjects of these Conjuring movies, are shysters and con artists. And I think one of the real issues I have as an adult now with the cottage industry that's still going on around the Amityville Horror is that the foundations for all of it were the true life murder of 6 members of a family in that house by the eldest son. There's a real true life crime, a real true life tragedy that all of this has kind of been built upon, and it does leave a bad taste. So that's been said now. I'll probably touch on it again when I talk about Amityville 2, but now that that's out of the way, we can just talk about the movie as entertainment, if that's all right. James Brolin, the male lead who plays George Lutz, is just he fucking knocks it out of the park. I love him in this movie, going from the really affable, nice guy with the new family and moved into the new house to just the ragged, coming apart on the edge guy at the end for anyone and everyone. And it's a common accusation thrown at The Shining for everyone and anyone who has ever thought that Jack Nicholson is already at 11 at the start of The Shining and there's really nowhere for him to go, and would rather have seen the mental dissolution of Jack Torrance in the film that they got in the book. Check out Brolin in the Amityville Horror, because that's that's the depiction of the family man who slowly turns potentially psychotic and makes really extra special friends with his axe. The performance is mesmerizing, and the slow simmering potential for violence that bubbles up towards the surface as the fractures in the family start showing are played to a T by him. Margot Kidder is, I gotta say, she's as cute as a basket full of kittens in this movie. The way they've pigtailed her up and the knee-length socks and stuff like that, and I don't know, there's just something about that. She's slightly less impressive than Brolin, but she's basically, I think the way she's pitching it is all of her paranoias are being sort of torn open and expanded upon by the supernatural elements. Take out the supernatural elements, and this is about a fracturing family, but all the fault lines are laid down at the start. And I think it's fair to say the chink in Kathy's armour in this film is they're all of her insecurities. This is a second marriage. She knows that George is taking on not just her but her kids and her religion as well, which she had to sort of sign on to for her to get the Catholic marriage that she wanted. So she's willing to overlook an awful lot because she feels like George is kind of like her life preserver in a way, I think. And so she gives a nice, increasingly fragile and fractured performance as well. On the flip side, Rod Steiger as Father Delaney he's a big old side of ham. Wise, he's coming from the why say a line when you can shout it school of acting, and that whole priest church intervention thing, although it's in the book, it kind of pads out the book and it kind of pads out the film. I really wish we could have just focused on the family. I'll be completely honest with you, and I know this is with the benefit of some 30 odd years and the world has moved on. The story could really benefit from erring slightly more towards the agnostic or atheist. The church intervention thing kind of gums up the gears. Now I understand why they're doing it. You know, a little film called The Exorcist happened, and whilst The Exorcist completely took the wind out of the sails of your Hammer Studios and people like that, suddenly everyone was running to catch up and start doing possession movies and have the church involved, and all of a sudden priests were heroes. All of a sudden they were the superheroes of this time. But Rod Steiger is actually a pretty fucking useless priest. He's a big hammy old ham, and probably more ham than Jody the Pig in the fucking movie, to be fair. Still, he had flies all over his face for that one scene. That was cool. I do like the flies. I do like the voice in that. If you hadn't had that character in it, you wouldn't have had the "get out" voice, which really creeps me out. You've got Lalo Schifrin's amazing sing-songy lullaby score, which will stick in your head for days. La 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 la. And Jody the Pig as well. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. But the girl's best friend Jody, they jettison the pig idea for the remake and just create a new DeFeo family member and make her a ghost. But surely a demonic pig is much more chilling or ridiculous. Look, if you're going to go for it, go all out. So go. You're either going to end up being sublime or ridiculous. But for me, the point where George is coming from the boathouse on the final night and looks up at his daughter's bedroom and sees a huge demonic pig with red eyes, you're either going to laugh your ass off, or, to my mind, that's film doing what film does, presenting stark images, just things that you couldn't present in any other way. It's a metaphorical thing rather than to be taken literally, and cinema can do that perfectly. So I got no issues with Jodie the Pig. I actually think she's one of the creepiest elements of the entire bloody thing. The hook of the film, that it really happened, is obviously the main selling point, but at the same time it completely hamstrings the entire project, because storylines are sort of dropped left, right and centre. Father Delaney, once we're done with him, we just seem to be instantly done with him, and he's left blind on a park bench. The little threads of the policeman keeping an eye on the house and sort of investigating, a little bit like Kinderman in The Exorcist, let's be entirely honest, it just flat out stops. And when the Lutzes leave the house, the film literally just stops. So what in promo is a real strength to play to get people in. Story-wise, it makes things fall flat. The whole isn't a cohesive whole because it's not a carefully structured story. It's based on the lies of the people who lived there and the fiction that was spun around that. So that's a big weakness to the film. But at the same time, it's probably its most valuable asset. This sort of PR spin that it's based on true events, but I'm not buying it. Also, because of that, I've written a little list. I've called the list "What the hell is going on?" to try and explain why this stuff was happening in this house. We've got a demonic pig. We've got a well that's a gateway to hell, which sounds more at home in a Lucio Fulci movie. We've got the good old Indian burial grounds. We've got reference to the Salem witch trials as well. And also we've got that weird vision that George has of what his double, Ronnie DeFeo, is Ronnie DeFeo, who is still alive, haunting the house. I mean, it's scattergun. And it's all over the place. I guess the worst crime the movie makes is that it's not scary. It's sort of shot and looks like sort of like a movie of the week. I do really appreciate the fact, you know, since we've had a whole slew now of quiet bang movies and everything, people walking down endless dark corridors, waiting for things to jump out from behind doors. It's actually really refreshing that an awful lot of this is in bright sunshine. And filmed as though it wasn't being filmed like a horror movie. Unfortunately, it never really gets to the horror movie bit of it, it's kind of ludicrous, but I really love it. The tone is set really well at the start when they're being shown the house and it's intercut with the murders that's happening, and that's probably the most horrific bit of it, and that's horrific because it really happened. So take from that what you will. I've got a real soft spot for the Amityville Horror, but I kind of know in my heart that it's a little bit rubbish. But James Brolin is fucking superb in it. The Lalo Schifrin music is excellent. I love Jodie the Pig. The Flies, the voice. What are you going to do? Essentially, it's the American haunted house story. It's not going away. The fact that it's completely made up doesn't matter. And the history of my country will tell us that, because we've got all of our historical buildings, all of which are supposed to be haunted, and we've got our ghost stories that come from the Victorian era and literature as well and beyond, and the Woman in Black, and you know, all of that, and yada 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 yada. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. It's a great story, and it is the American haunted house story, and for that alone, I need to tip my imaginary hat to it. So next up will be Amityville 2: The Possession. That is wild.